Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master, and today we're talking about all sorts of stuff. But before we get into it, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, and leave us a comment. We've got a great community here, and it's all thanks to you guys. Thank you so much for being here. With all that said, let's dive in. Prologue to this one takes place in the 1980s when Brainiac's old body is destroyed. So Brainiac floats around like an energy cloud for a while. During that process, he thinks of God as the quote unquote master programmer, and he comes to think of Superman as the quote unquote angel of death, who's out to destroy him. So Brainiac sets out to destroy both of them, and he raises an army on Sistis 2, which fails to destroy Superman. So Brainiac then travels to a Necron Tomb World, where there are a group of Necrons that have been in hibernation here for ages. They were created by the Kurtan to fight the Eldar, which is the race that Superman Red is. The Kurtan wanted to eat the masters of the Eldar, known as the Old Ones. So the Catan wanted pawns to send into battle on their behalf. And they promised a race called the Necron Tier an end to their constant pained existence. But what the Necrons got was assimilated. Prisoners in robotic bodies, abused and manipulated by their masters. Now, all these millennia later, Brainiac is no better. He wakes the Necrons up and he hacks them. So once again, the Necrons have a master who abuses and manipulates them, treating them as disposable cannon fodder. And Brainiac is basically their king. So the Necron pyramid-shaped starships are reactivated, and Brainiac leads them towards Earth to delete all organic life and finally bring about the end of the Superman family. Which brings us to the main plot. The supercomputer in the Fortress of Solitude is tied to countless satellites through space. Superman uses a technique called quantum entanglement so that when a satellite transmits a message, the supercomputer's internal components are quantum entangled with the satellite's internal components. So if a particle in one of them vibrates, the corresponding particle in the other one vibrates. And as such, communication over any distance is instantaneous. So this acts like an early warning system, and the supercomputer alerts Superman, who's on the Kent farm in Smallville, Kansas. He has a son named Chris, who he's teaching how to use his powers. Superman's ovular yellow belt buckle is actually a communications device. So through that, he receives the alert and tells Chris to fly home. Then, after Chris does, Superman flies to the Fortress of Solitude, where Superman Red is also arriving. Superman Red says that after the recent incident where Chris's mom was killed by Lex Luthor, he thought Superman might be able to use some extra help. Superman feels awful about what happened to her, and he thanks Red for coming, adding that he won't turn down help. They check the supercomputer and see the Necron fleet, and Superman Red is shocked. The entire reason that the old ones created him was to kill Necrons, and he hasn't seen one in ages. Superman Blue says he doesn't recognize this race, so Superman Red tells him who they are. To Red's shock, Superman Blue sees the Necrons as victims, duped by the Catan, tricked into thinking they were receiving what is basically medical assistance, when in turn it was actually servitude. Superman Red says you can't trust these guys, and whatever humanity they may have once had, it's been burned out of them through the assimilation process. Superman Red also starts to talk about their weapons. They have guns that work kind of like a transporter pad, breaking you down into your component particles slowly and painfully. They even have antimatter based weapons that would work on Superman. As a brief side note, we reasoned that these weapons would work on Superman based on how we see him interact with the antimatter wave during the Crisis on Infinite Earths event. At any rate, so Superman Red says these guys aren't even alive, so the no killing rule doesn't apply here. Superman Blue says these guys are victims, and it's the duty of Supermen to help them. Red and Blue are a lot like Leonardo and Raphael from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, in that they often butt heads like this. And in both cases, the one in blue is more of a good guy, while the one in red is hot-tempered and stubborn. So just like Raph would do, Superman Red gets mad and he flies out to where the Necrons are. And he's worried, by the way. The last time he fought them, he was a cosmic being with a ton of psychic powers. Thanks to a run-in with the Ghost Rider of Rome, he lost those powers, and due to X-kryptonite exposure, now he has Kryptonian powers instead, which may or may not hold up against the Necrons. So Superman Red considers the fact that this might kill him, but he goes anyways because he doesn't want them to reach Earth, because it's a coin toss whether or not pre-crisis Kryptonians can deal with these guys by themselves. And if they can't, then humanity certainly doesn't stand a chance. Meanwhile, Superman Blue, whose player was more resourceful than I anticipated, by the way, flies to the planet Oa, where he consults the Great Library there and he researches the Necrons, their origins, and their homeworld. Then Superman Blue uses his ability to fly faster than the speed of light, and he flies back through time to when the Necrons were created. Then he flies a little further back to when they were still known as the Necron tier. Their homeworld at that time is barren, and its star is constantly blasting this planet with radiation, making it insanely hostile to life. Their bodies were ridden with radiation sickness, and they lived a morbid life, constantly fearful of their coming deaths. Their cities were built in anticipation of their demise, little more than vast tomb complexes with a few temporary homes for the living. So when they meet Superman, they are jealous of his health and they hate him for it. Nonetheless, Superman takes a sample of their DNA and then leaves. Just as he used to use time travel to commute back and forth to the 30th century when he was a member of the Legion of Superheroes, he uses that same ability here now to go visit his old friend Brainiac 5 in the 30th century and ask this heroic descendant of the original Brainiac for some cloning equipment, as well as the technology to genetically engineer the clone bodies so that they don't have all of these problems that the original Necron tier had. Meanwhile, Superman Red engages the Necrons in combat in the 80s, in what is at the time the modern day. And they are very hard to deal with. He seems to kill several of them, but they're covered in a sort of liquid metal that they call a necrodermis. And just like the T-1000 from Terminator 2, they heal from whatever damage he does to them, and then they rise like zombies and they keep shooting them with all these crazy ray guns of theirs. Meanwhile, Superman Blue brings the completed cloning pod back in time, sets it up on a planet that's in their path, then uses Professor Dalton's duplicator ray on it. While the duplicator ray struggles with organic matter, it works perfectly well when it comes to duplicating machinery like a cloning pod. Eventually, Brainiac leads the Necrons to this world that's in their path where the cloning technology is. And Superman Blue jams Brainiac's control signal, then offers to transfer the minds of the Necrons into the cloned Necron tier bodies free of illness. And the Necrons, of course, feel like they've heard this before. So Superman Blue takes one, puts him in the machine, and successfully transfers his mind into an organic body again. Using his super speed, Superman Blue then reduces the amount of time it would take to do this to all the Necrons. And Superman Red can't believe what he's seeing. So he decides to make himself useful by fighting Brainiac. So we roll to see who gets to go first, and Superman Red has the highest initiative. So he punches Brainiac, doing 17 points of damage. Brainiac attacks back using one of these antimatter guns that the Necrons have, doing 9 points of disintegration damage to Superman Red. Then Red fights back, rolling a 9 and a 3, which hits, doing another 17 points of damage. Brainiac fights back, shooting him again, doing 12 points of damage this time. Red hits back, rolling a 6 and a 5, which hits, doing another 17 points of damage. And with that, Brainiac is knocked out. Meanwhile, Superman Blue finishes, and the Necron tier aren't sure what to do now that they're organic, right? They can breathe again, which is something that really bothered them to the point of having PTSD from their inability to do it before, right? And they can taste food for the first time in like millions of years. So they seem happy, but weirded out. Superman Blue goes to Superman Red, but Superman Red is an old warrior, and it's hard for him to let go grudges. So he just can't deal with the idea of helping Necrons, so he leaves. Superman Blue gathers up all of this technology and takes it back to Earth, which brings us to our epilogue, which takes place a while later. The Necrons' robot bodies, their pyramid-shaped ships, their stargates, and pretty much everything but their weapons are now at Area 51, along with what's left of Brainiac. Superman Red's brother, quote unquote, is the Red Thor, who was assigned to the Avengers team by the United States government in the 1970s. So after the Avengers defeat the newest incarnation of Ultron, Red Thor brings his body here to a warehouse designated for robot storage. Once the Red Thor leaves, Brainiac's eyes light up, and all of those transparent hexagonal plates on his head slide out of the way, revealing snake-like cables that make their way over to Ultron's body. Brainiac makes some repairs, and Ultron's eyes light up. The two robots interface, and we treated this like the rules for astral combat under the telepathy section on page 64 of the 3rd edition DC Heroes rulebook. Characters who are mentally linked through telepathy may engage in mind-to-mind combat. Attacks that are made in this fashion do mental damage using the attacker's mental stats as the acting value and effect value, and the defender's mental stats as the opposing value and resistance value. So, for Brainiac to quote-unquote hit Ultron, it would be Brainiac's intelligence of 26 versus Ultron's intelligence of 12. So Brainiac needs to roll a 3 or higher, and he rolls a 7 and a 2. Then to calculate damage, it's Brainiac's will of 20 versus Ultron's mind of 4. By the way, all of Ultron's stats we translated from TSR's Marvel Superheroes role-playing game. So there's no guesswork here, right? These are the official published stats. At any rate, so Ultron takes 17 points of damage, which quote-unquote kills his mind. Brainiac then downloads himself into Ultron's adamantium body. And the name that we give to this new supervillain then is Ultroniac. Then he activates one of the Necron stargates and leaves the vault that he was locked in. And Ultroniac is going to be a problem for the heroes to deal with in the future. But as always, that's a story for another day. And that was it for this one. To be honest, I was hoping this would have gone completely differently because we always play a big game at the end of August every year. Uh, and as of me recording this, we played this earlier today. And as of me recording this, it's August 24th, Saturday night. And the story with that, by the way, is when Terminator 2 came out in the summer of 1991, we were all on this huge Terminator kick after seeing that movie. And the GM at the time was Jay Mora. And in one of his games that he ran in 1992, he mentioned that the end of the world would happen on August 29th, 1997, which was the date they give Judgment Day in T2. And then, a couple years later, we graduated and I took over as the GM. And that whole time, I kept thinking that I had to come up with some kind of big game to run on August 29th, 1997. So by the time it finally rolled around, we ran the biggest game we've ever ran ever. We rented a town hall. We played all night long. I had, I don't know, like 3 or 4 dozen players, maybe. I wore a tuxedo. And the stakes were that if the heroes failed, I said it would be the end of the game world and we wouldn't play anymore. And if they won, we would keep playing. So obviously we're still playing, and that kind of that's a spoiler there, right? Tells you how the outcome of the game was. But a year after that, the players wanted me to run another big game on August 29th of 1998. So we did. And for about a decade, that was a tradition where every year on August 29th, I'd run a game that was somehow kind of bigger than the normal stuff that I do, right? After a while, though, an August 29th would like fall on a Wednesday or a Tuesday or something. And the players didn't like it because they had to get up for, early for work the next morning and stuff like that. So after a while, it just got to the point where usually the last weekend in August, we would then run our big game of the year. So that's what today was supposed to be. And I put a lot of work into stats for the Necrons, hoping for a big knockdown, drag out fight. So this one didn't go the way I had hoped. But that's okay, because if everything went the way I planned it to go, then in my opinion, that would mean that I was railroading my players, right? And I hate railroading, because if the players don't have a say in things, then why play, right? If they're just watching everything unfold, then just watch a movie or a TV show or something. You know what I mean? So that said, they had a good time today. Hopefully you guys had a good time hearing about what we were up to. If so, as always, we would love it if you took a moment of your time to smash that like button. Check to see if you're still subscribed, because YouTube loves to unsubscribe people. Ring the bell and be sure to leave us a comment. From all of us here at the longest running superhero role-playing game on Earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure.